So students, in the previous session we have talked about androecium. You know, androecium is represented by stamens, right? So the number of the stamens will vary from one species to another species, right? The arrangement of the stamen within the flower, right? So arrangement of the stamens with respect to the other parts of the flower, and also arrangement of the stamens with respect to themselves, that means other stamens. So this will be also different, and we have seen epipetalous condition, epiphyllous condition, or sometimes the stamens may be directly attached to the perianth. And during the formation of the bundles, that means attachment of the stamens with each other, there we have studied three different types: monoadelphous, diadelphous and polyadelphous. And you should remember these things with examples, appropriate examples. And one more thing I should tell you about the stamens: the length of the filament. See, you know what is a filament, right? So the length of the filament may vary in the same flower. That means the different filament length will be there in the same flower in some species. Okay, so for example, there are two examples called salvia is one and other one is mustard. In these flowers you will find like this, stamens of different length. So one may be long, or two may be long and two may be small, or sometimes four may be long and two may be small. Like that, the arrangement of the stamen not only varies, but also the length of the filament also vary, that too within a flower. And best example for that is salvia and mustard. Note this point, okay? Length of the filament can vary within a flower like this. Examples are salvia and mustard. Okay, now let us move on to the next aspect of this chapter, that is gynosium. So you very well know gynosium means what? It is the female reproductive part. It is the second essential whorl and also the innermost whorl of the flower, right? And this gynosium, it is consisting of, or it comprises of one or more carpels made up of one or more carpels. So here carpels means what? Carpel means what? See, you have seen the structure of the gynosium, right? So it will be consisting of three different parts. See, this is the stigma and a tube-like structure that is called as style, and here the lowermost swollen portion will be called as ovary. This is called stigma, this is called style, and this is ovary. Okay, see, how do we define these things? Stigma is the uppermost receptive surface for pollen grains. This is the receptive surface for pollen grains. So it is going to receive the pollen grains. That means when pollination occurs, of course you are going to study about the pollination. I think you have also studied in the plant kingdom chapter briefly about the pollination while studying about the life cycle of the angiosperms. What happens in the angiosperms? The pollen grain, which acts as the male gametophyte that is released from the anther. After the anther is completely mature, the pollen grain released from the anther will have to deposit on the stigma, maybe of the same flower, maybe of the different flower. So pollen grain, when it comes and falls on this, so idna accept madodu yaru, adanna receive madodu yaru anta helidre, that is the stigma. Okay, so the receptive surface or receiving surface for the pollen grain is stigma. Why only stigma can receive the pollen grain? It is because, see, the stigma is able to produce certain chemicals which make a chemical interaction between the chemicals produced by the pollen grain and chemicals produced on the stigma, and these chemical interactions actually will decide whether the pollination should happen or not. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಪೊಲನ್ ಗ್ರೇನ್ ಬಂದು ಬಿದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಅದು ಪಾಲಿನೇಷನ್ ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಂತಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಫರ್ಟಿಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ಆಗಲೇಬೇಕು ಅಂತಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಅಗೇನ್ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫಿಕಲಿ, ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ದಿಸ್ pollen grain is specific, if this pollen grain is able to germinate, or if this pollen grain is compatible with this particular gynosium, then only it will be allowed to germinate. Germinate anta helidrenu, this pollen grain from here it produces a tube like structure, pollen tube anta kariteve. Of course you are going to study about the detailed structure of the pollen grain in the next year, in the second year, but just for now you should understand, ಒಂದು pollen grain nalli there are two male gametes. Each pollen grain of the angiosperm carries how much? Two male gametes. So these two male gametes, they are immotile. You have learnt in the plant kingdom chapter, you have learnt about various divisions, algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, ella kaltidiri. Basically in algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, the male gametes are always motile. Do you remember this one? Male gametes ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ flagella ಇರುತ್ತೆ, they can swim in the current of the water to reach to the female gamete, right? But in this case, though the angiosperms are most well developed of among all the plants in the plant kingdom, they still do not produce what? Motile male gametes are not produced here. The male gametes are non-motile, and that is why the entire gametophyte, okay, so gamete producing plant structure is called as what? Gametophyte. Idanna ನೀವು already plant kingdom ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಲ್ತ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀರಿ ಅಲ್ವಾ? The gamete producing plant structure is called gametophyte, and in the case of the angiosperms, the male gametophyte is nothing but the pollen grain. Okay, not only in the case of the angiosperms, even in the case of the gymnosperms also, the male gametophyte is represented by the pollen grain. And this pollen grain, when it comes and falls here, so after the chemical interaction between the stigma and the pollen grain, now if the pollen grain is matching with this particular gynosium, then ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇದರಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ ಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾಕೆ? ಮೇಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಮಿಟ್ಸ್ ನಾನ್ ಮೊಟೈಲ್ ಇದೆ, ಸೊ ಮೇಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಮಿಟ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ, and they have to reach where? To the ovary where the female gametes are present. So from here to here they are transferred with the help of a tube like structure, and that tube like structure will be passing on from the receptive surface called stigma to ovary to reach to the female gamete through the passage called as style. Okay, style means what? It is a slender tube like structure, slender tube like structure that provides passage for pollen tube. ಸೊ ನಿಮಗೆ pollen tube ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತಲ್ವಾ? ಸೊ pollen grain when it comes and falls on the stigmatic surface, now from here male gametes have to be transferred to the ovary, right? So in order to transfer them, the tube like structure that is formed from the pollen grain to carry two male gametes is called as pollen tube, and that pollen tube is traveling all along this passage called stigma to reach to the ovary. Then what is ovary? Ovary is the basal swollen portion of carpel consisting of one or more ovules on a flattened cushion like structure called cushion like structure or tissue. It is a cushion like tissue called placenta. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, what is the meaning of this is, see, it is the basal, that is the basal portion of the carpel, and it is swollen, right? So it is swollen to consist one or more ovules. ಇದು ovary ಒಳಗಡೆ ovules ಅಂತ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, and those ovules they are arranged on a cushion like tissue, which is a flattened cushion like tissue. ಚಪ್ಪಟೆ ಆಗಿರುವಂತಹ ತುಂಬಾ ಮೆತ್ತಗಾಗಿರುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಕುಷನ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಟಿಶ್ಯೂ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ದಟ್ ಟಿಶ್ಯೂ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಪ್ಲಾಸೆಂಟಾ. ಸೊ ದ ಅರೇಂಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಓವ್ಯೂಲ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಪ್ಲಾಸೆಂಟಾ is also called as placentation. The pattern of arrangement of the ovules on the placenta, that is within the ovary, is called as placentation. Okay, so when you take the cross section of this, ಈ ಓವರಿಯನ್ನ ನೀವು ಅಡ್ಡವಾಗಿ ಹಾರಿಜಾಂಟಲಿ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, then you will see the arrangement of the ovules on the placenta. Okay, we are going to study the different types of placentation after we study in detail about the gynosium. Okay, first let us know about the different aspects of gynosium. Then we can go for placentation, right? So here the ovules, I mean the carpel, as I told you, they can be one or more. In a flower, there may be only one carpel or maybe more. So if it is only one carpel, it is nothing. It will be always one. There is no question of fusing with another carpel because it is only one. In the case of many carpels, so ಒಂದೇ ಇತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ monocarpillary ಅಂತ ಕರೀತೇವೆ. Monocarpillary means single carpel, ಇದು ಒಂದೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್, ಸ್ಟಿಗ್ಮಾ, ಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ಮತ್ತು ಓವರಿ ಎಲ್ಲವನ್ನ ಸೇರಿಸಿ ನಾವೇನಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ, ಕಾರ್ಪಲ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ. ಸೊ ಇದು ಫ್ಲವರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದೇ ಇದ್ರೆ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ monocarpillary. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇಫ್ there is more than one, like two ಇದ್ರೆ ಮೇ ಬಿ bicarpillary. Bicarpillary means two, this is one. And tricarpillary means three, right? And tetracarpillary, pentacarpillary, it goes on. And usually ಒಂದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿದ್ರೆ monocarpillary ಇಲ್ಲ, there are more than one carpels in a single flower, then it can be called as multicarpillary ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ. It is called multicarpillary condition. And in this multicarpillary condition, so more than one carpels are there, and these carpels, they can be fused with each other. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನೆನಪು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, when petals are fused with each other, what were they called as? They were called as gamopetalous condition. When petals were free, it was called as what? It was called polypetalous condition. Similarly here, if the carpels are fused with each other, fused condition again anta kariteve, it is called as syncarpous condition. Syncarpous. Syn stands for being together. Okay, syncarpous. Apocarpous means they are free. Apocarpous means free, that is not fused, whereas syncarpous means fused carpels. Okay, syncarpous, apocarpous, different examples we can give here. So syncarpous, you can give the example of poppy. Poppy means papaver somniferum ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ. ನೆನಪಿಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ, because it is not mentioned in the textbook. Poppy ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಗಸಗಸೆ. Apocarpous, you can remember the example of which one? Citrus ನೆನಪಿಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು, or mango ನೆನಪಿಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು. Any other example you can remember. Okay, so multicarpillary ಇದ್ದಾಗ it can be fused or it can be free. Syncarpous, apocarpous ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ. Okay, and similarly we also find that here another example you can give for syncarpous is that lotus and rose. Lotus and rose for apocarpous, lotus and rose for apocarpous, and for syncarpous you can give the example of tomato and mustard. Sorry, tomato, yes, mustard. Tomato and mustard, you can remember these examples. Okay, see these examples you need to remember regarding the syncarpous, tomato and mustard, for apocarpus, lotus and rose. So this is how the carpels are present. Carpels also can be called as pistil. Okay, carpel ಗೆ pistil ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ಕರೀತೇವೆ ನಾವು. Pistil, carpel, both are same. Okay, for now you understand that much. So this is about the basic idea of gynosium and what are the different parts are there in the gynosium, and so and their functions also, right? And you should understand one more thing about the ovary. This swollen portion called ovary, after fertilization, that means idru olagade enide ovules ide. Ovules, how they are arranged? On a flattened cushion like structure or tissue called as placenta. So those ovules will be consisting of the female gametophyte and female gamete. ಓಕೆ, ಆ ಓವ್ಯೂಲ್ನ ಒಳಗಡೆಗೆ ಫಿಮೇಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟೋಫೈಟ್ ಮತ್ತು ಫಿಮೇಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅಂಡ್ ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ದ ಫರ್ಟಿಲೈಸೇಷನ್, ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಸಿಂಗ್ಯಾಮಿ, ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಮೇಲ್ ಅಂಡ್ female gamete happens, that is what is called fertilization, isn't it? So then after that, this ovary develops into fruit, and ಅದರ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಓವ್ಯೂಲ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ, those will develop into seeds. After fertilization, a mature ovary will develop into fruit, and ovules after fertilization will develop into seeds. This is a very important information that you need to remember. Okay, now let's move on for the next concept about the gynosium, that is placentation. That is, if you take the cross section of the ovary, how or in what pattern the ovules are arranged on the cushion like tissue called placenta, that is what we need to look at now. So after looking at the gynosium, after studying the gynosium, the different parts of the gynosium, now we need to understand the placentation. See, placentation means the arrangement of ovules within the ovary. Arrangement of ovules within the ovary, that is on the cushion like tissue that is present within the ovary, called, the tissue is called as placenta. So placenta da mele yava pattern alli ovules arrange agirutte ovary ಒಳಗಡೆ, that is what we call it as placentation. In the angiosperms, normally we find 5 different types of placentations. Okay, see, this is the ovary. See, this, you know, this is the structure of the carpel that you just studied. Here, the swollen portion ovary, when you cut open, when you take the cross section of the ovary, anyway you are going to study this in practical classes. So in the second year, the first experiment itself is like this, where you have to take the cross section of the ovary of angiosperm, and you will study the entire structure of the placentation here. Okay, so when you take the cross section, you will see different patterns of arrangement of the ovules or different types of placentation. In different species it will be different. So, and they have been named by different methods, or they have been given different names by looking at the structure. Okay, you need to know how to draw the different types of placentation, and you should know the explanation regarding that, and also you should remember the examples for different placentations. Now let us draw one by one all different placentations. See, first one is called as marginal placentation. You all have seen the beans. Have you seen the beans pod? Beans ನೋಡಿದಿರಲ್ಲ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ. The beans fruit ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ, right? The elongated fruit like structure in the beans, it is called as pod ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ, POD, pod. Okay, and within that, how the seeds are arranged? See, the seeds are arranged on one wall. They are attached to one wall like this. That means they are attached to one margin of the ovary. Idu ovary anta helidre, see, fruit means nothing but it is the mature fertilized ovary, right? So the seeds are nothing but ovules. After fertilization, the ovule is going to become the seed. So if you find any fruit, if you cut open the fruit, you will see the arrangement of the seeds, right? And that is nothing but placentation, right? So in this case, these are the ovules and this is the ovary, and this kind of placentation is called as marginal placentation. Marginal placentation, and the example for this is pea. Pea example ಕೊಡಬಹುದು, ಅಥವಾ beans example ಕೊಡಬಹುದು, bean, right? So these can be the example. Okay, this is very easily understandable. Beans ನೋಡಿರ್ತೀರಿ, ಯಾವುದು pea, ಬಟಾಣಿ ಕಾಳು ನೋಡಿರ್ತೀರಿ, and in that case this kind of placentation will be found. The next one, let us see axial placentation. See, in this case Axial means around the axis anta. Axial refers to around the axis. The central axis of the ovary will be there, and around the central axis of the ovary, the arrangement of the ovules will be there. Arrangement of the ovules around the central axis of the ovary is called as axial placentation, and the diagram of the axial placentation will be like this. Okay, so ovules are arranged here. See, these are the ovules. Ovules are arranged in such a way, all the ovules are attached to the central axis. This is the central axis. Okay, and not only that, here you will see the wall formation in between each chamber. Idu one chamber ide, this is one chamber, this is one chamber, right? And each chamber, this chamber, it is called as locule anta kariteve. This is called as locule. Okay, the chambers of the ovary, they are called as locules, right? And each locule will consist of two ovules in this diagram, and this kind of placentation where all the ovules are attached to the central axis and the ovary has been divided into many chambers, or they are called as locules, right? So this kind of placentation can be called as axial placentation, and this can be found in lemon, tomato, and even in your favorite China rose or hibiscus. Okay, so ನೀವು ಲೆಮನ್ ಮತ್ತು ಟೊಮ್ಯಾಟೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಈಸಿಲಿ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. ಯು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಕಟ್ ನೌ ಇಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಕಟ್ ದ ಟೊಮ್ಯಾಟೊ ಅಂಡ್ ಸಿ ಟೊಮ್ಯಾಟೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಸಮ್ ವಾಟ್ ಲೈಕ್ ದಿಸ್ ಅರೇಂಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ದೇರ್, ಅಂಡ್ ಈವನ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಕೇಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಲೆಮನ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಕಟ್ ದ ಲೆಮನ್ ಯು ವಿಲ್ ಸಿ ದ ಸೀಡ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಸಿಚುವೇಟೆಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಎಟ್ ದ ಸೆಂಟರ್, and they are all attached to the central axis of the ovary or the fruit. Right? So here this is called axial placentation. The next one that we are going to study is the parietal placentation. Parietal placentation means peripherally arranged ovules. See, you need to know how to draw these diagrams. See, these are a pair of ovules present here, and one more pair of ovules present over here, and one more pair of ovules over here. Okay, so ovules attached peripherally anta helidre, they are attached to the wall of, they are attached on the wall of the ovary, right? So this is what is called as parietal placentation. Parietal placentation, you should remember what is parietal. Peripherally attached ovules. Okay, and this is the central axis of the ovary, right? And so parietal placentation can be found in mustard and argemone. Mustard gottu, mustard andre sasive. Argemone anta helidre, it is called akkarike anta kariteve. It is usually a weed that is growing in agricultural croplands, and usually in North Karnataka region, argemone anta kariteve. Argemone is usually used as a kind of vegetable there. Okay, it's a wild crop or wild growing small herb. So this kind of placentation can be found. Parietal placentation can be studied in mustard and argemone. I have been underlining only those terms which are scientific names there. Okay, so I have been telling you repeatedly, that is why it is very important for you to know and underline the scientific names wherever you write them. Keep that in mind. After parietal placentation, now we go for the free central placentation. In this free central placentation, you will see the ovules arranged exactly at the center. Ovules arranged exactly at the center of the ovary. But here the ovary is not divided into different chambers. Nodi, here also the ovules are arranged exactly at the center here, right? And here also the ovules are arranged exactly at the center, that is on the main axis, on the central axis here also, right? But the only difference is what? Illi ovules attach agide, there is no wall formation and there is no formation of the locules. Illi chamber formation aglilla, right? They are all arranged all along the main axis, but without chamber formation. That is why they are free and there is no chamber formation. Illi chamber formation ide, locule formation ide. That is why they are centrally located and they are free. This is called as free central. Free central, and free central type of placentation can be found in dianthus and primrose. Dianthus and primrose both are the examples for which one? The free central type of placentation. See, 1, 2, 3, 4 types of placentation we have seen, and the last type of placentation that we are going to study is called as basal placentation. As the name itself is suggesting, the ovule is attached. Usually in the case of basal placentation alli hegirutte anta helidre, ಒಂದು ovary ಒಳಗಡೆ ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ovule irutte and that ovule is attached to the base of the ovary. So how is that? In what fruit or in what species do we find such kind of this thing? Arrangement of the ovule. See, let us see. See, in this case, you are seeing this is the ovule. This is the ovule, and that is ovule is attached to the base of the ovary, and that is why this is what is called as basal placentation. Basal placentation can be studied in sunflower. It can be studied in sunflower. It can be seen also in which one? The marigold. Marigold gotta nimage? Marigold means what? Chendu hoo anta kariteve. Okay, ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ marigold means ಚೆಂಡು ಹೂ, right? ಗೇಂಡಾ ಫೂಲ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ ಹಿಂದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ. So marigold and sunflower are the two best examples for basal type of placentation, right? So this is regarding all the different types of placentation, and you should know how to draw these diagrams and you should know the appropriate examples. This is a very important question for you. ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು placentation ಕೇಳಬಹುದು for 2 marks or for 1 mark. They even can ask mention any 2 examples for free central placentation or mention any 2 examples for parietal placentation. ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಕೇಳಬಹುದು, right? Any type of question can be asked on this 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark, or even 5 marks question can also be asked on this particular topic, and this is a sure question. Remember this, mark this, and practice these diagrams.